Humankind's mastery of satellite technology has been one of the greatest advancements of the modern age. Your phone, your internet, your credit cards, your GPS, nearly your entire day. All of it relies on our ability to fling something into the sky to a precise orbit, where it will continue to circle the Earth for generations, providing us with the critical information and connectivity. And in the 6 decades since that solitary beep first rang out in the sky as Sputnik circled the Earth, we've gotten extraordinarily good at it. I'm sure on that night 60 years ago, the night sky seemed nearly infinite from the perspective of those first space pioneers. Sure, we had tossed a pebble into the vast ocean of darkness, but that was all it was, a 200-pound pebble. You can't fill up an ocean with pebbles, can you? I'm your professor, Glenn Torres-Spelliscy, and this is the Space Law and Policy podcast series. Thanks for joining me. I'm reminded here of the Chinese legend of Jingwei. Chinese legend tells the story of the tragic death of a young girl who drowned while playing in the Eastern Sea. But instead of darkness, she found herself mysteriously transformed into a mythical bird, Jingwei. Determined to protect other children from suffering her fate, Jingwei carried pebbles and twigs from the western mountains and dropped them into the sea in order to fill it up. The Eastern Sea, amused by her efforts, scoffed and said she would not be able to fill it up even in 1,000,000 years. But Jingwei was unmoved. She retorted that she will spend 10 million years, even 100 million years, whatever it takes to fill up the sea, so that others would not have to perish the way she did. Now, when the satellite era began in the mid-20th century, the thought that we could ever potentially fill the night sky with satellites must have seemed as ludicrous as did Jingwei's pebbles to the Eastern Sea. But we have become extraordinarily efficient in our pebble delivery, and as we look up, we see a sky that is continually becoming more and more crowded. Of course, the story of Jingwei can only guide us so far, because unlike Jingwei, we are not dropping our pebbles from the safe harbor of flight above the ocean. Rather, we are casting them upwards, standing on the bottom of the sea, slowly blocking out the light with each throw, slowly burying ourselves alive. As a global society, we face 4 main regulatory challenges when it comes to managing Earth's orbit. The first is the exponential growth in the number of new launches and new satellites each year as the world lurches forward in the space era. The second is a large amount of existing defunct satellites and debris. The third are accidental collisions between satellites that add to that debris. And the fourth are deliberate anti-satellite attacks, conducted either by state or non-state actors, which create new debris. Until the 1990s, the satellite business was dominated by the superpower nation-states, the United States and the Soviet Union. After the breakup of the Soviet Union and the end of the Cold War, a new space age dawned, and this one is far more inclusive of other countries. Countries large and small, comprised of many and composed of few, are celebrating space victories and demonstrating increased capacities that are making space, particularly orbital space, a much more global, complicated, and crowded place. Since 2014, a majority of satellites and a majority of launches have been from nations other than the United States and Russia, primarily China, Japan, Europe, and India. Perhaps the biggest change is not from the number of nations participating in space, but from the number of private actors. Indeed, space has gone commercial and in a big way. In 2021, Starlink, SpaceX's satellite system, comprised 81% of all the payloads launched from the United States. And as market participation has increased, private equity has gotten on board. In 2019, private space actors raised a then-record $5.8 billion from private actors across 198 different rounds of investment. That number increased to $14.5 billion in 2021. And as private markets get involved and profits start to be generated for investors, we can expect that the market will continue to grow, and the number of space companies over time will increase exponentially. Private companies have already dramatically increased their participation in the satellite market, launching 36% and growing rapidly, of all satellites in the post-Cold War period, an even larger percent in the past few years. The effects of these launches cannot be eliminated. The night sky is going to become more crowded, and it needs to do so if we are to advance the human race. The many proposed massive constellation projects pose undeniable challenges. However, if they are successful in bringing broadband internet around the globe, and the transformative potential of such global access is also undeniable, the result is that we must be thoughtful as to how we proceed. The amount of existing space debris is hard to determine. We can track the pieces if they're big enough, and we do. The space surveillance network operated by the US Space Force tracks about 32,000 space objects, many of which are uncontrolled and at significant risk of creating further debris. Most of the pieces that are tracked are larger than 10 centimeters. The problem is smaller objects could do significant damage to space assets, and there are a lot of smaller objects out there. The European Space Agency estimates that there are approximately 1 million space objects from greater than 1 centimeter to 10 centimeters, and up to 130 million space debris objects greater than 1 millimeter to 1 centimeter. Of those tracked objects, the United States, Russia, and China are responsible for the vast majority of the debris. So why does it matter? Well, even when a small piece of debris between 1 and 10 centimeters in diameter collides with a functioning space object, the object is likely to be severely damaged or completely destroyed due to the high velocity of the orbital debris. And space agencies are only capable of detecting debris 5 to 10 centimeters or larger in low altitude orbit, and 0.3 of a meter to 1 meter in diameter in higher altitude orbit. The end result could be the creation of more and more space debris, as non-maneuverable objects collide with other such objects. This potential cascading effect, as more and more debris is created and more collisions occur, is named the Kessler syndrome, after former NASA scientist Donald J. Kessler. In the late 1970s, Kessler raised alarms that, quote, space would eventually be so congested with dead satellites, pieces of satellites, derelict rocket stages, exploded fuel tanks, detached solar arrays, and other bits of space detritus that low Earth orbit, which in our technologically dependent age is prime real estate, would become unusable. The next major risk is that collisions, both accidental and purposeful, will generate new debris. The first recorded accidental collision between two large satellites occurred in 2009, and it sent debris flying in multiple directions, including to higher orbits. In addition to accidental collisions, space operators have also been aware of the possibility of directed collisions. This is where a nation-state, or even a company, launches a satellite or a missile with the purpose of bringing down a competitor satellite. These types of attacks are referred to as anti-sat or ASAT attacks, and more countries are demonstrating the capability to conduct them. Unsurprisingly, the US and Russia were the first to demonstrate capabilities in this area. As the two nations' prowess in space increased, other countries sought to develop counter-space technologies that would serve to reduce or eliminate the advantages they had, including through the use of anti-sat weaponry. In 2007, the Chinese launched a direct-ascent ASAT weapon, attesting to the vulnerability of satellites in low Earth orbit. In 2019, India announced that it had used a ballistic missile interceptor to destroy an orbiting satellite, becoming just the fourth country after China, Russia, and the United States to test such weapons. In November 2021, Russia conducted another ASAT test on one of its defunct satellites, adding over 1,000 pieces of debris to the growing pile and causing the International Space Station to initiate avoidance maneuvers as a result of the debris cloud. Now, as the awareness regarding space debris grows, individual states have begun to take steps to mitigate its effects. It is important here that we are not just thinking about preventing collisions, but as with all expansionist endeavors, as our exploration of space surely is, we need to think about how to clear room, how to safely discard the old and bring in the new. Or this raises questions on who owns the debris and who is responsible for its removal. Those are hard terms to answer in questions of debris, particularly small objects. If the ownership or issue could be sorted, there are a number of new technologies being developed that could allow for the removal of debris or even the repair and repurposing of old satellites. One of the primary innovations in the regulatory landscape surrounding debris are new state-based requirements that all launches have a deorbiting plan so that they do not generate more debris. One of the biggest challenges for space debris removal is simply cost. If the owner or operator of the debris can be identified, then the launching state is financially responsible. But how do you identify the owner of a bolt that is floating in space or a piece of a rocket chassis? Removing space debris is expensive, so we have to give thought on how we're going to fund the removable of unidentifiable debris. Now, there are a number of possible solutions that we can take from analogous situations we've had here on Earth. This is a typical global commons problem, so we have experience in dealing with those, and it is possible that some of our techniques could be applied to human activities off-Earth as well. For example, after a series of oil spills caused massive environmental damage, Congress imposed a per-barrel tax to establish the Oil Spill Liability Trust Fund that could be used to clean up spills. And when significant tracts of land had been poisoned by chemical and industrial waste, Congress passed the Superfund Bill, which established a trust fund in 1980, funded primarily through petroleum excise taxes and taxes on the chemical industry, that could be used for cleaning up abandoned or uncontrolled hazardous waste sites. Similarly, a per-launch tax or taxes on the space industry could be used to fund an unidentified debris removal trust fund that could help bear the costs of necessary future remediation efforts. Well, that does it for another episode of the Space Law and Policy podcast series. I look forward to seeing you next week, and thanks for joining me.